My feed exploded with a rumor using XRP to erase America's $38 trillion debt. I almost laughed it off until I saw a US president's name tied to it. You see, I'm talking about an idea that is so out there that it sounds like sci-fi. What if the government seized a hidden crypto stash and poof, the national debt disappears? Well, I had to know if there was any truth to this. Here's a spoiler though. It gets even crazier the deeper that I dug. So it's late at night and I'm scrolling through crypto forums and, as one does instead of sleeping, and suddenly I see people buzzing about XRP bailing out the US national debt. Yeah, XRP, the crypto coin, paying off $38 trillion of Uncle Sam's IOUs. Now, the conversation was everywhere, even in our Discord, which, by the way, we do run a free educational Discord. The link is in the description. You can feel free to join the discussion there if you want. Anyway, it sounded like a joke, but the people there, they were actually seriously debating it. It seems bonkers. And then someone drops the bombshell. Donald Trump's name enters the chat. You see, apparently, back in January, an XRP community researcher floated a scenario involving Trump and Ripple's XRP Escrow. The claim was that Trump could somehow seize Ripple escrowed XRP, that's a giant stash of around 35 billion XRP tokens, by the way, and hand it over to the US Treasury. Now, my first thought was, is that A, even legal? Can a president just yoink crypto assets like that? I was, of course, very skeptical about that idea, let alone the other stuff. But the mere image of Trump saying, we're taking the XRP, folks, was, quite intriguing, maybe too intriguing to ignore. Now, according to this researcher, at least a guy named Dr. Horace Drew, and I do question the PhD that's associated with this guy, by the way. Anyway, Ripple's escrow was valued at around $200 billion at the time. So if the government gradually, pushed XRP's price to, let's say, $500, well, it could wipe out the national debt, which was around $34 trillion back then. Now, of course, just the difference here between market cap, XRP's price, and actual liquidity. These are all very different things because, believe it or not, if XRP's price was $500 per token, there isn't actually $34 trillion of liquidity. There's actually significantly less, maybe only $1 to $2 trillion at the higher end of that spectrum. So, the idea that it could wipe out the national debt was pretty bonkers if you ask me, hence the questioning whether this guy has a PhD or not. Anyway, that's what they were saying. An XRP moonshot magically fixing the country's balance sheet. Sounds like the Avengers plot twist where crypto saves the day. Now, I was kind of close to just rolling my eyes, as I'm kind of doing now in this video. But then I found so many people were talking about it. Another community member, going by Utility FTW, had a very similar daydream. Maybe a lucid dream at that. His vision was that Ripple donates its entire escrow to the government, and Ripple's network, becomes the backbone of America's new financial system. Kind of like, hey, Uncle Sam, here's a gift. Now you owe us one. Now at this point, I'm thinking, are these people really for real? I mean, donate $200 billion worth of a crypto asset to the government. The idea was equal parts generous and just absolutely absurd. Then, as if things weren't wild enough, by October the discussion came roaring back to life thanks to Newsmax host named Higbie. Now, he tossed out another scenario wild enough on TV, which again is bonkers that someone was on TV talking about this and doesn't understand economics 101. But get this, he's suggesting that the government could just inject $1 trillion into XRP, pump its price, and then sell off some XRP to pay down some of the debt. Like let the price drop, and then just do it again. Basically, what he's suggesting here is rug pulling all of the retail investors and everybody else who's invested in XRP. And he said this live on TV, basically quite happily to let the government commit fraud. Bonker. I know it's not like technically fraud, but still, like it is insane. And to think that retail investors, the XRP army, are pro this idea, it's absolutely insane. Just rinse and repeat, steal money from the everyday person. Almost an inverse Robin Hood, if you will, basically manipulating their market and their way out of a $38 trillion debt. Now, this is someone who clearly doesn't understand liquidity, doesn't understand how the mechanics of market cap clearly works, and doesn't understand that there's not that much money in the space. You cannot, with crypto, not even with Bitcoin, pay off $38 trillion of debt because there isn't $38 trillion of liquidity. It's kind of mind-blowing that people are still even talking about this. Now, of course, I tried to imagine the Treasury treating XRP like a yo-yo, up, down, trying to shake out as much money from their everyday retail investor as possible, right? It's devious, and Higbie himself admitted that it could cause huge swings in the price. Well, no shit, Sherlock, right? No kidding, right? The plan would be likely just robbing everybody, like I say, the inverse Robin Hood. By now, even Trump himself had chimed in, indirectly of course. In one interview, Trump joked, maybe we'll pay off the national debt with crypto. Now, he said it with a smirk, of course, very tongue-in-cheek, because he does understand the economy and he does understand Eco 101, right? But just hearing a president like that mentioning using crypto to fix the debt made my ears perk up just a bit. Was this idea actually moving from fringe forum to actual political chatter? Was he really considering an inverse Robin Hood? It certainly felt that way. So at this stage, I was, well, let's just say equal parts amused and rather intrigued. Because I mean, the very notion of XRP, a crypto coin solving a problem that has stumped economists for decades is hilariously optimistic, right? But I couldn't let it go without doing some additional homework to make sure that I wasn't the one on the wrong side of this argument. So I needed to get some answers to the big what if. Could any of these XRP debt payoff schemes actually work? And what would it mean for the XRP holders like us? Well, probably we would end up much poorer, right? First, let's talk about the numbers, because reality check. You can't just wish a $38 trillion debt away, can you, right? Ripple, the company behind XRP, has about 35 billion XRP locked up in escrow. Let's think of that as a time-released little piggy bank. Now, at the recent market price of around, let's say, $2.35, depending on whether it is today, I don't know. This is recorded a little ahead of time, so maybe the price is $2.50, maybe it's $1.90, who knows, right? Anyway, let's just say for round numbers' sake, it's $2.35 per XRP. That whole stash would be worth roughly $87.5 billion. Yeah, so now $87.5 billion is an awful lot of money. It's 87,500 piles of $1 million each, right? Now, the US national debt, that is 38,100 billion. Yeah, that was $38.11 trillion, or about $111,000 for every American that is alive, right? So if the government were to try to rug pull every retail investor, well, every retail investor in the US, or every single American in the US would have to invest $111,000 into XRP each for them to be able to wipe it out. Yeah, get your head around that bullshit. Anyway, so this is the government grabbing that kind of 87.5 billion XRP stash, and threw it all at the debt. Would be like throwing a cup of water onto a forest fire. It hardly makes a dent. Even if Congress said, all right, we're talking and taking all of Ripple's XRP now, well, they would still be short by, I don't know, $38 trillion. Clearly, just seizing the tokens wouldn't be enough, would it? The price of XRP would have to skyrocket for these debts to, at least, well, the idea of these debts, to kind of be wiped out to come true. In fact, it would require more money than you would probably even imagine. More than $38 trillion. So get your head around how they're going to do that one. Now that's kind of where the crazy price targets all come into this crazy nightmare of a solution, if you want to call it that. Remember, right, that $500 XRP idea? Well, that's what I dug into next. Right now, XRP sits in the low single digits in price, doesn't it, right? So getting to $500 would roughly be about a 200x, right? Actually a little bit more than that. In fact, to cover even just half of the US debt, or around $19 trillion, those escrow tokens would also need to be worth about $19 trillion themselves. Here's some quick math for you then. 35 billion XRP valued at $19 trillion means that each XRP would have to be around $543. That's, just about a 21,620% jump in its current price. Yes, you heard that right, a 21,000% gain. My calculator, of course, nearly burst into flames with just looking at that number. But here's the thing, right? I bought XRP back when it was 11 cents, sometimes even lower, right? Way back in the day. So I'm not paying $543. There's a difference here, right? So if I paid, let's say, just 10 cents to keep this nice and round, and it's valued, let's say XRP does jump up in price and it's now $543, well, where does the extra $542.90 come from? It didn't come from me, so it comes from somewhere else, right? So this is the idea that people think that the market cap actually relates to real money, and it doesn't. It only shows you the last traded price, which doesn't show you the liquidity being buyers and sellers, but more importantly, the capital inflows that sit underneath all of that, right? So for us to move the price to like $500, it wouldn't actually take all that much amount of money to move the needle, meaning that there isn't that much money actually in the space or in XRP as a single asset. You couldn't, if the price went to $543, well, you're not going to be able to liquidate all of the XRP all at the same time instantaneously and pull out $38 trillion worth of money, because guess what? It doesn't exist. It is not there, right? So this is where really things just are out of proportion, blown up, and people just are talking about mythical numbers. They're either doing this because they are A, stupid, B, they're doing it because they just want to get the clicks and they just know that they're not being genuine, or C, they're insane. I can't really see a fourth option, so you've got to choose one of those. And that's just to cut the debt in half, right? $543. To wipe out, the slate completely clean, the whole $38 trillion, XRP's price would need to hit over $1,000, $1,088 per coin, if you could instantly liquidate it all and withdraw all of the money at the same time. Which, of course, that the second that there's a hint of selling, the price is tanking faster than you can say FTX. Now, I'm not even going to say the percentage increases on all of that. Okay, maybe I will. It's 43,000% plus, right? So we are talking about XRP going to four-figure territory, right? And if you're an XRP holder, that might sound like a dream come true, but let's be real. Expecting all of this stuff to happen just because the government wills it to be so, well, you'd have better luck and better chance finding a unicorn in my garage. And here's a spoiler, I don't have a garage. So at this point, I had to remind myself, and I'm going to have to remind you guys, that this one might just shock you too, I'm not a financial advisor, right? But, I'm also not an Econ 101 expert, right? And nothing in this video, believe it or not, is financial advice. Cryptocurrencies are highly volatile and you could lose all of the money that you invest. You should always do your own research and you should consult a qualified professional, not some guy on YouTube or some guy with a doctor in his name on Twitter, because they don't know what they're talking about, it would appear. Anyway, your investments, they are your responsibility, and you should know that nothing is ever guaranteed when it comes to investing. Neither this channel nor YouTube are liable for any losses, and this video is purely for entertainment and educational purposes only. All right, so that's the disclaimer out of the way. Let's get back to this regularly scheduled madness that we are calling XRP news today. So, with those insane price targets in mind, I wondered how XRP ever been envisioned to hit those levels by any serious people. Well, surprisingly, there are some people out there that are serious, and yes, they thought much longer timeframes than maybe what we were all used to, and under very different circumstances, we could see the price move. Now, some analysts, even outside of this whole debt narrative, generally do think XRP could reach triple digits one day. For instance, in October, an analyst named Rob Cunningham, host of the KWUL show, actually said that in a bullish scenario, like if a bunch of crypto ETFs get approved and big money flows on in, XRP might run up to between $200 and $500. That would be given around inflows of maybe $10 to $20 billion. So $20 billion could equate to about $200 to $500 price. So yeah, you can see how you're not going to wipe out the debt, right? Now that's without any government shenanigans, no inverse Robin Hood situation, just market growth and hype, right? And a report from Changelly, a crypto exchange, projected that by 2040, XRP could break $500. Now, of course, 2040, that's 15 years away. That's not exactly a quick fix for today's debt, is it? But it does show that some people think that a $500 XRP is not pure fantasy. That's okay. I don't think that it's pure fantasy either, given enough time. What I do think is pure fantasy, though, is paying off a national debt of $38 trillion with XRP. In fact, you wouldn't be able to pay off that amount of debt with the entire crypto space combined. And then you've got Dom, right? A co-founder of EZA. Now, this guy recently encouraged everyone to hold their XRP until it's $1,000 per coin. Yeah, that right, $1,000 a coin. Now, he's basically saying just don't sell, no matter how long it takes. Now, Dom is not claiming the US government will make that happen, of course. He's just ultra bullish here. But the fact that credible people are tossing around numbers like $500 to $1,000, that all kind of make me raise a bit of an eyebrow here. Maybe this debt idea took root because some people believe that XRP can moon that hard eventually, and there's a whole bunch of people who just don't understand how market cap is calculated, how price is calculated, and how capital inflows are the only thing that truly matter here, i.e. the liquidity. Anyway, it's a kind of a perfect storm of hopium, I guess. There's a huge debt, there's a huge crypto stash, huge price targets, boom, problem is solved. If only it was that simple in reality. Okay, let's play just devil's advocate for a moment. What if the government actually tried one of these crazy inverse Robin Hood schemes? Let's say tomorrow the Treasury Secretary calls up Ripple and goes, "We're nationalizing your XRP escrow, hand it over." Now, it would be pretty chaotic, to put it mildly. First off, there's going to be some legal battles out of the wazoo, right? Ripple's not going to just gift 35 billion XRP without a fight, or at least not without some fat compensation, right? And imagine the president here, right? The government seizing corporate-held crypto assets. Well, that's Pandora's box. Now, let's not ignore that and say that they actually get the escrow, right? Now, the US starts pumping XRP. Maybe they secretly, or not so secretly, buy up a whole ton, driving the price to heights that was just never seen before, right? The day that XRP hits $500, the government starts selling chunks of it off to pay the debt. Initially, jubilation, right? Crypto saves the day until people realize that the market is being gamed and they're just losing their money. Like I say, inverse Robin Hood. The price would crash right after the sell-off. Maybe then they try, to let's try Higbie's rinse and repeat idea, pump it up again, dump it again, right? You'd have this rather, I guess actually it would be more of a civil war that would break out in the US if the US government tries to run this pump and dump in broad daylight or even behind the scenes. The volatility would be off the charts and people won't stand for it. 1 week of XRP is at $500 and next week it's at 50 cents, then back up again, right? It would be a trader's heaven or hell and a long-term investor's nightmare, I guess. I mean, there's no way that the US government would be able to pull this off without indirectly making new millionaires or multimillionaires and billionaires indirectly through this shenanigan. And again, who is to say that actually the XRP army, they don't front run the US. Maybe they sell at $480. And of course, the US government are holding a worthless bag of XRP. We should also consider the global reaction to all of this, right? Because crypto markets, they don't operate in a vacuum, right? If the US tried to engineer XRP's price, well, big players worldwide would react. Other governments might just try to front run them or even freak out. Are we okay with the US controlling a crypto like this? Well, big whales might front run them and their moves anyway, right? And they're going to pump it? No problem. I'll buy first and then I'll sell it before you do, right? You could turn into a free-for-all for absolutely everyone, right? The US might find that it can't control XRP's price as neatly as they maybe would have hoped, especially not repeatedly, right? Markets have a way of humbling even the most powerful of players. And remember, right, part of this crypto appeal is the decentralization. No single entity controlling it. So if the US government started meddling, well, some of that faith would shatter fast. People might just flee from XRP, right? And if no one's jumping into it, where does the extra capital come from, right? The US won't be able to sell it to anyone if there's no buyers left to buy it from them. So, you've got to be right about these things. And speculators, they might just flood in to ride the occasional wave here or there and front run everybody else. Either way, it's going to be absolute madness, right? The idea of slowly reducing the debt this way sounds nice on paper, but it is in practice impossible to actually achieve. Like it'd be trying to tame a wild horse by deliberately startling it over and over again. Good luck with that. Personally, as an XRP holder myself, I have to consider, would I even want all of this to happen? I mean, sure, seeing XRP rocket to $500 or $1,000, it would sound amazing for your portfolio for all of 5 seconds. I won't lie, I've daydreamed about the Lamborghinis scenario like everybody else, but not like this. If this were to happen, and it would not be organic, right? I want it to be through organic growth, organic adoption, real utility, the awesome stuff. Now, if it spikes because of Uncle Sam is playing kind of puppeteer with the market, well, that is shaky ground. It could crash faster than it probably pumps. And who knows who would actually end up holding the bag at the end? Because I have a feeling it won't be the government, it would be the regular people like us holding a cryptocurrency that had been completely rugged at $0 value. Now, I would feel betrayed in crypto's ethos. Crypto was born as to a response to the government and central banks and all of their antics, not to become a tool for them to basically inverse Robin Hood and steal billions of dollars from regular, hardworking people. Now, let's dial this back to the reality, because is any of this actually likely to happen? In my opinion, no, not ever. Right? These discussions, while entertaining, are mostly just thought experiments with uneducated people. Right? These things that they're talking about, they're just not possible in the current climate that we're in. There's not that much liquidity in the market to actually be extracted. There isn't enough money in crypto, all of crypto, let alone just XRP. Right? They'd highlight just how colossal the national debt is here and just how small the crypto space is. It is a true drop in the bucket by comparison. The fact that some people are even considering it tells you a couple of things here. One, there's just a whole ton of optimism or pure desperation around finding a solution for this debt problem that they find themselves in. And two, the crypto community loves to imagine being the hero of the story. Crypto saves the world. It has a nice ring to it, right? But it will come at the expense of every single investor that's ever been in crypto. So should we also consider that if the US government were seriously to look at crypto as a tool, they might not single out XRP at all? Why not Bitcoin, right? It has a deeper liquidity pool, and even a digital dollar maybe, or even a basket of other crypto assets. Now, the whole scenario of targeting Ripple's escrow feels pretty specific, right? Almost like an XRP holder's fantasy in some kind of deluded, kind of crazy, insane way. There is no secret that XRP has one of the most passionate communities, but you do really have to break down who they are trying to help here, because it isn't XRP's price, it isn't XRP's deeper liquidity, and it's not the XRP army or the XRP community who would benefit from any of this, right? There are people who do believe that, XRP is destined for major things, myself included to some extent, but governments, they typically move much slower and cautiously with any new technology. They're not talking about adopting anything here, they are just talking about using it to rob everybody. And often, that's quite a suspicious thing, right? The idea that President Trump or anyone in office actually is going to grab some XRP to fix the debt would require a seismic shift in how authorities view and even use a cryptocurrency, let alone the fact that they would have to see capital injections that would dwarf that of the actual debt in itself. So you can see how it's counterintuitive, right? You'd have to inject more than $38 trillion in order to be able to pump out enough to pay off the $38 trillion. You can see, where does the money come from, right? How do you actually do it mechanically? It cannot be done in the current climate. Now, with all of that said, the conversation in itself is rather fascinating, isn't it? Because it shows how crypto, once this kind of niche internet money, has grown big enough that people can kind of seriously speculate about it intersecting with national politics and economics. Kind of crazy, because 10 years ago, no one would have said maybe the government can use Bitcoin or XRP to pay off their debt, right? And they could say it with a straight face. They can't even say it with a straight face here in 2025. There might be some crazies out there, but it can't be done. Now, this potentially is being put on the table. At least it's on social media and occasionally on some kind of crazy TV segment. I don't know if we want to call that progress. Maybe we do. I don't know. You can let me know in the comments. Now, I'm going to admit that after going down this rabbit hole, I felt a mix of relief and a little bit of FOMO, right? I'm relieved because I did realize quite early on that the US probably isn't going to be able to even confiscate the XRP for such a stupid grand scheme of debt obliviation anyway. And I do keep holding on to this hodling in peace because of that, right? Because I know it's impossible. But I also FOMO'd in a little bit here because if by some wild chance, right, the US government takes a slightly different stance, like collateralizing XRP that they would hold as part of a way to maybe sort out their debt issue or borrow more or refinance in some way, well, then there's actually a ground to be more optimistic, right? Because the idea of pumping the price and dumping the price is so basic, it's kind of just child's play and it's pathetic. However, if the government were to accumulate a significant portion of XRP, control a significant portion of the supply, and then we can already see that there's supply shortages and supply shocks on the horizon, where they could potentially use the XRP that they have in a reserve to actually have it as collateral for a loan that could help refinance the national debt. Now, that is something that's more plausible, and by default, you would actually see proper price appreciation through the supply-demand metrics without having to steal from the poor to pay the rich. Inverse Robin Hood, as I've mentioned a few times. So, we can kind of imagine, XRP maybe soaring $100, $500. Now, would I have enough in my bags if that was the case? Would I know when I should be taking profits? This is the kind of classic crypto mindset though, right? What if, right? What if this and what if that? What if the crazy scenarios play out and I didn't believe that it was going to happen? Now, it's unlikely, of course, but hey, sometimes crazy things can happen in crypto. And then, yes, I am looking at all of you Dogecoin millionaires. I mean, it's just bonkers. Now, speaking of being prepared here, let me drop a very quick tip right now. Now, I always keep multiple exchange accounts ready just in case, right? Just in case something big does happen. Now, you never know when one exchange might freeze up or go down completely. Now, I've got my plan A, my plan B, my plan C when it comes to trading platforms. I'm talking about Binance, Coinbase, Kraken, as well as others like Blowfin, BitGet, and many, many other names that you would recognize. Now, I make sure that I'm signed up, KYC'd, and I have them all tested. Now, by the way, I do have a link in the description down below to my website, where I list all of the exchanges that I do personally use. And those links on my website, they're affiliate links, which means if you do sign up and trade through them, then it does actually support the channel here at no extra cost to yourself, just so you know. Now, it's kind of like having multiple exits in that theater, right? Now, you don't want to be scrambling to find a door when there's a rush, right? So if tomorrow the price of XRP did do something crazy and wild, and you're going to want some options on where you're going to sell or where you're going to buy. Now, this is just good practice in crypto. Exchanges, they can get overwhelmed, so you don't want to put all of your eggs in one basket. Nobody wants to be holding a bag on FTX, for example. All right, so this whole video has been me ranting about some of the insane things that I've seen on crypto Twitter and, of course, even on mainstream media. So I'm going to step off my soapbox here because where are we at? Well, XRP saving the US economy. So after all of this, what is my takeaway home message here? Well, it should be pretty straightforward, right? It makes for a great story, doesn't it? A great ride, but it's never going to happen in my opinion. It's a what if that sparks some excitement and some debates, of course, but it's not a plan that anyone in Washington is seriously going to consider, right? And of course, if I'm wrong about it and they do try it, well, it's going to be one heck of a spectacle, and I am going to bail as fast as I can from XRP in that case, because there is no way that I'm going to be left holding a bag to pay off a US debt. That's definitely not going to happen. But I tell you what I will be doing if it does. I'm going to have my popcorn ready and my exchange accounts, like I said. In the end, right, this whole saga gave me a new appreciation for just how massive $38 trillion actually really is, right? It's easy to throw around words like trillion without actually picturing it, right? Because the idea that even one of the largest crypto treasuries in the world, XRP, right? The Ripple-esque XRP Escrow, is basically just a tiny little drop in the ocean of the US debt. That blew my mind and probably many others, right? This kind of Trump and XRP rumor is just absolutely insane. Now, it's a reality check on the scale of the global finance versus crypto, right? Take the US national debt and compare it to the entire market cap of crypto right now. It's still a drop in the ocean in comparison. Crypto is big, sure, but it's not national state big, right? They are colossal. Now, that said, the gap is narrowing year by year, and that's part of maybe why we're all here, right? We believe in a future where crypto plays a major role, maybe even helping solve problems once thought unsolvable. Just so you know, right? Just, maybe not this particular problem is going to get solved with crypto overnight. So, will XRP hit $500 on $1,000, maybe even beyond? Possibly in the far future if all the stars align, right? Bullish adoption, real utility, maybe some major global crisis that pushes people into crypto, right? Now, I'm holding my XRP with cautious optimism, but I'm not holding my breath on some kind of government debt, kind of inverse Robin Hood rug pull for XRP. If anything, I would expect them to use it more as kind of what you would do with stocks, right? You use it as collateral to get a loan, refinance your debt through a reserve, not through pump and dumps. And if nothing else, this whole rabbit hole was kind of a fantastic reminder of why crypto is just so darn exciting, crazy, stupid, many different things. And it kind of makes you dream big, doesn't it? Sometimes maybe a little too big. Maybe we need to stop taking the mushrooms at times, right? Yes, I'm looking at you, the TV host, right? But I will take a wild kind of creativity over a boring day any day, right? Now, if somehow you did find my ranting here entertaining and maybe crazy, then you should probably stick around because we are going to tackle some of the craziest crypto questions and scenarios on this channel in the future too, while all trying to keep it as real as possible. And hey, if you're not already hanging out with us in Discord, the link is waiting for you guys in the description. We'd love to have you all there and have your takes on all of this as well. But don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dive stories and hit that bell so you don't miss the next adventure. Thanks for coming along with this wild ride, and I'll see you all in the next one.